This is the Syrn Media Grant Info Session. Thank you for joining us. Today we have the Jerome Foundation. Please stay tuned. Hi, thank you so much for joining us. Today we have Lann and Eleanor from the Jerome Foundation joining us. I'm so excited to learn more about your programs and just what you have open and available now. Would you mind please just introducing yourselves and your roles at Jerome? Lann, if you wouldn't mind beginning first.
Sure. I'm Lann Briel. I'm program officer with Jerome. I've been here for about almost 3 years now.
Great. Eleanor?
My name is Eleanor Savage. I'm the program director, and I've been with Jerome Foundation for 13 years.
Long time for both of you. Thanks so much for joining us. Would you mind speaking to your company's mission and specifically the dedication to support filmmakers specifically in the 5 boroughs of New York and Minnesota?
I'd be happy to do that. Jerome Foundation was founded in 1964 by artist, filmmaker Jerome Hill. He was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, and lived most of his creative, generative life in New York City. So we fund in the state of Minnesota and the 5 boroughs of New York City uh, to reflect the work of our founder. And we're focused on supporting early career artists and nonprofit arts organizations that support early career artists in these 2 regions.
Amazing. So Jerome currently has a few programs open for film, video, digital artists. Can you tell us a little bit about each of these programs?
Sure. So we have 3 programs open right now. The kind of first 2 are the Minnesota Production Grant and the New York-based Production Grant. Both of those grants are a $30,000 grant in support of pre-production, production, and post-production. We've opened it up more this year due to COVID and being responsive to our filmmakers and applicants. So this production grant supports generative artists who conceive and create new original work. We don't fund filmmakers who solely interpret or develop the work of others. And the program doesn't fund producers or managers or screenwriters, just strictly directors and media makers. And we fund both individual directors and co-directors in this program. So also additionally in Minnesota this year, we have a new program called the Artist Development Grant. The development grant provides up to $7,000 for filmmakers to engage in a self-designed mentorship with an experienced director to further their filmmaking craft or professional skills by working on a specific project. And filmmakers can only apply to one of these grants. You can't apply multiple times. And for more information, check out our website about eligibility requirements surrounding these programs.
That's amazing, the idea that there's so much flexibility within the different options of grants that you have open. Is there any stipulation or, really are there any guardrails on how the award should be spent?
Yeah, so the grants, again, they're for individual artists or co-directing teams that have worked together on previous projects. So if you're working on a co-directing team, in order to apply, you have to meet work sample eligibility. So you have to have worked with your co-director on a past project. Applications may not be submitted by fiscal sponsors, production companies, or multi-member LLCs or other organizations. The production grant, again, has expanded this year. So it's, we cover all the phases. And matching grants are not required. The program does not fund retroactively, so only costs incurred after the grant is awarded and a grant contract is signed will be supported. The directors must request funds between November 2021 and April 2023. For the Minnesota Artist Development Grant, it's the same time frame as well.
Okay.
So those are some of the stipulations.
And within that, of these projects, you mentioned early career. We're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But Are there specific, types of projects that you're looking to support in these programs? We know they're director or media maker only, not producers, et cetera. But what types of projects themselves are you trying to support? Genre, anything like that?
Yeah, so we support documentary, narrative, experimental, or animation projects, or any combination. I know people are working in lots of hybrid forms. And we are looking for work that's guided by our values, which are innovation and risk, diversity and humility. And one of the things about our program is that the grant criteria that you'll find in the guidelines on our website are the exact same criteria that we give the panel for evaluating. So we try to be very transparent about what we're looking for and the type of work that we want to support.
That's great. So for filmmakers watching this, it's out there. You want to know how you get the grant, the information is fully available, and that's what they're going to be judging you on. Yeah, and speaking to early career, what exactly do you mean by early career? Because some people might think, oh, that means a certain age or right after you've left film school, but that might also be someone who's switching careers into filmmaking, switching into being a director now. What are your ideas of early career?
Yeah, so we're focused on artists between 2 to 10 years the in the field of creating their own generative work. So we make a distinction between artists who are, involved in other people's work as actors, and are not creating their own original work. So that creating your own original work is the key piece. And one of the things we say about that 2 to 10 year frame is that we know that artists' careers don't happen consecutively over, this kind of constant trajectory. So it's about what you put on the clock in terms of your generative work. So people take time out to go back and get an MFA program sometimes. They take time out to have kids or to work, to support their family, or, any number of things we know affects that trajectory. So Lann works with everyone to evaluate eligibility and to help answer questions and help understand how to, kind of figure out that frame. But we're really focused on your work as a generative artist. And we also know that sometimes film projects, we've had filmmakers, that take 6 to 7 or 10 years sometimes to create, one project. And so the time that it takes, the way that you're working over time, we try to be flexible and understanding around how each artist is working. And age for us is not a criteria. We've had people who started making films, and I'm thinking about Al Milgram, who I want to raise up and send our remembrances to. He passed away this year, but he was one of our oldest filmmakers, and I think, what was he, in his 80s, Lann, when he
was
applied?
in his early 90s.
Early 90s, yes. So, yeah.
I absolutely love that. I mean, I think more and more people are thinking about allowing people to switch careers and to live a life that allows them to give them joy. And if that means finding filmmaking at 90, you can be an early career filmmaker and apply to a program like yours that facilitates that. So that's truly great. Thinking about the criteria that you were speaking about, that your panelists are using, your judges are going to be using, and that people need to demonstrate. Can you talk a little bit more about those? Artistic merit, impact, feasibility, what those things mean, and just how an applicant can show those things in their application?
Yeah, so applications are evaluated by panelists based on artistic merit, impact, and feasibility, like you said. So under the application in under artistic merit, applicants will submit work samples to be considered by panelists. And we always recommend to try as much as possible to incorporate your most recent work and or your strongest work. Because it is a comparative and competitive process, panelists prefer to see more recent work. But if you feel your stronger work may be a few, 5 years ago, well, you can submit that too. So those are things we like to encourage people to do in that portion. And then in impact, there's a series of questions in the application, and we're looking at who are the specific communities that you're working with and the participants and the audiences you're trying to engage, whether that's social or aesthetic, and who are you looking to engage and inspire and impact through your work, and what is your relationship and connection to them and their desire in your desired impact. And then also looking at, do you have producing partners or collaborators in the community? And then particularly for documentary, but this is also for other genres as well, but particularly for documentary, the relationship and partnerships with organizations and communities that are connected to the project are really incredibly important, because the panel wants to see that you have an authentic relationship with your subject matter. So we always kind of emphasize that as well. And then under feasibility, under impact, we also ask for your resume. So, and in your resume, we ask you to parse out your directing experience, and then any other kind of media or production experience through that resume. And then the final is feasibility, and that is determined by the project's budget. So panelists will look at your budget and see that what you want to accomplish with the funds.
How many work samples are you trying to see from filmmakers who are applying, or from artists who are applying? And what are you looking for in those work samples? I know you said it could be 5 years ago if that's your better work, but can you just talk a little bit more about that sample necessity?
Yeah, so in both the Minnesota and New York programs require 2 work samples. In the Minnesota program, applicants are required to submit 1 completed work and a second work that can be completed or a work in progress. And in the New York program, we ask for 2 completed work samples. And then there's also a third option for applicants to submit a work in progress that of the project that they're proposing in the application. Some of the things that I would suggest is, as far as my experience with Jerome, this is the 2nd year that I've coordinated the program. I've really noticed that the panelists are very responsive to innovative and risk-taking work, and we don't define innovation and risk. We don't define that for you. We want our applicants to define it for themselves, but that seems to kind of rise up through the process, and when the final cohort is developed. So some of the limitations on the work samples, we don't, we ask that you do not submit work that has been produced or edited or acted in and not directed. Please don't submit industrials or festival projects that group team projects. And then any work that you did not have primary control over. And I think that's about it. Oh, and news or video clips produced for journalistic purposes are not eligible to be submitted as work samples as well.
Okay. Are there any common mistakes or faux pas that you've seen quite often when reviewing applications for the film, video, and digital grants? I'm thinking, Eleanor, over the 8 years that you've been there, you may have seen quite a few. What are some things that people maybe should avoid?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to think about the application as your opportunity to, visualize having 6 people from the field, and you're trying to tell your story about what you want to do and kind of who you are as a filmmaker. The biggest mistakes that I see are, just not being clear, submitting a resume that kind of mixes directing and with your other experience, and so it's not clear to the panel exactly what work you've done. And then, just not directly answering the questions or providing a full thought out answer to some of the questions. In documentary, another issue that comes up quite frequently is panelists want to understand if you're working with a particular community or with a particular subject matter, what is your relationship to that community? And do you have, if that community is very different from who you are as a filmmaker, what relationships have you done? What work have you done to build trust and connection? And, what accountability do you have to that community for the work that you're doing and the story that you're telling? So that's some of the things. And Lann, do you have other things to add?
I think just, like Eleanor said, the resume is very important. And we do have a sample resume on our website and that you can take a look at. But again, parsing out that director experience over their production or other work experience is important. And then making sure that you read the work sample requirements and you kind of fit your work samples that we submit work samples that are eligible. So just to be clear on that.
A lot of what you're talking about feels like things that would make for a better film, like the accountability. That not only makes for a better application, but it makes for a better project. Is there a part of the application that you would encourage applicants to pay more attention to? We've spoken about submitting their resume and making sure that's correct, but is there a particular part that you'd say really emphasize this?
I think a lot of what we've kind of said already too about the work samples and the resume, and that I think on top of that, having those authentic relationships, but also having an authentic voice in your application. Panelists are very responsive to that. They want to see your work. They want to see your work. They want to learn more about you and what drives your work and your voice and vision for your work. So that's what I can recommend.
One other thing I would say there is we have a question that asks you to kind of reflect on where you are as a filmmaker and what you feel your strengths are. And that's an opportunity to kind of think about your work samples and how your strengths might be reflected in the work samples. And also kind of areas of development that you see for yourself. So we're focused on early career artists, and filmmaking is a very complex process. If there's some part of that you're like, oh, I really need to develop my work with sound, or working with actors, whatever the element is, if you talk about that, that tells the panel that you have a lot of self-awareness. So it's not seen as a weakness or a fault or a problem. It's more about where are you and what do you want to do and where are you going, and being able to name that and for the panel to know that what you're doing and what you want to do is a very positive thing for a panel process.
I think people tend to shy away from those things because they feel like they need to present themselves in the best way, and that means without weakness. But as you're saying, that humility is one of the things that you look for in the application, and that's encouraging honesty in the application so that people know that there's space for them to really learn and develop in your program, and you can see if you can really be a match to fill those honest gaps that they need help with. I'm thinking just about how your program has gone. Can you actually speak to some of those projects that have come through Jerome where you have done early development funding and they've become successful stories because what you've been able to give those projects has helped them to grow and develop into what they became?
Yeah, and Lann, please jump in. I think that without naming specifically different projects, sometimes Jerome Foundation is one of the first funders for many filmmakers, kind of a first grant opportunity. And people are able to, have told us that they're able to secure additional funding if they get the Jerome grant in place. And so that is really exciting for us at Jerome. And we really are interested in meeting early career filmmakers where they are and helping. And we see early career as a spectrum. There may be people who are very early on and just kind of finding their voice, finding that voice, and people who are kind of moving on or just at that cusp of really going. And we don't have a specific career trajectory that we prioritize. There are some artists who want to have that Hollywood dream come true. There are some filmmakers that are really invested in community, and what they define as success is about telling a story or getting a story out there that has not been told, and they're doing community building through their work and creating visibility. And we're completely in support of that kind of work and everything in between there as well.
Lann, what about you? Any success stories maybe from the production grant that you can speak to?
Yeah, well, just kind of building off of that, I was excited this year, and I know we don't want to. I was just excited because two of our more recent grantees have been nominated for Independent Spirit Awards, so that's exciting. Ekwa for Farewell Amor and Isabel Sandoval for Lingua Franca, so that was exciting. But like Eleanor said, there's so many great opportunities, whether that's engaging with the community or if you're an experimental filmmaker, finding your audiences and community, and same, animation as well. So we're just very excited and thrilled to be supporting early career filmmakers and their work.
One of the things I will say is that Spike Lee did receive a Jerome grant. And at one point, Spike Lee was an early career filmmaker. And the first time he applied to the Jerome Foundation, he did not get a grant. We were working on our archives a couple of years ago, and I found the actual letter. But then the next time he applied, he got some feedback from the foundation. The next time he applied, he got a grant. So that is one of the things that we try to do is, encourage filmmakers. It is a very competitive thing, grants are. If you don't get it the first time, don't give up. Talk to us, come back again. Know that it is a competitive process. And we don't have enough funding. We're actually a relatively small funder in the landscape of funders. So it's more about our limited ability to fund more projects. And please come back. There are so many amazing projects that come through the application process, and we can't fund everything that is amazing. And so don't give up.
Thank you so much. This has been inspiring. Ending on Spike is always great because, if he can be resilient, and so much of his career is about that, then filmmakers should definitely be encouraged to be resilient in applications for programs like yours. Thank you both for joining us today to present the Syrn Media Grant information about the Jerome Foundation. And really, can you just remind us of the website, and so filmmakers know exactly where they're going to apply, Lann or Eleanor?
Yes, it's jeromefdn.org.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your taking the time, and filmmakers, apply. It's a great opportunity. Have a good one, guys.